There we are. Hi, everybody. A couple minutes late. Thanks for your patience. My name is Margaret Pennard. I'm an eclectic reader and a historical fiction and fantasy author, and you are here today to hear about Climathon, hopefully for New Year's Eve. That is the purpose today. New Year's Eve, got a little sparkle, got a little, I don't know, tried for a fancy hairdo, but we just got out of the shower like 11 minutes ago, so. But I do have my tea and I do have my stack of books. So welcome everybody. Welcome friends. I hope you had a lovely holiday. If you're still celebrating your holiday, I hope it continues. So I'm going to be sharing the book stack and the bookshop list because that's where it took a few tries. Bookshop was being ornery today, but that's where I'm collecting my recommendations. And then the book stack is actually the pile of possibilities. So I'll get into those after I acquaint you with the prompts for Climathon. And of course, this isn't a word, so let me explain what it is. We've got Wild Island Farms, which is Tamsin, and I believe she's somewhere in Western Europe. Doing very cool things on a farm, and she started reading climate books on her Booktube channel and highlighting that with Climathon, mostly nonfiction, and it was in January last year. And this year she's added a co-host, which is Well Traveled Books, who I also follow. She put out an announcement video and they made it year long. So that's the exciting news. I was planning on doing something for this in January, and I thought, I'm not good with like consistently doing things over a whole year. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, maybe even 6, but maybe it'll be a long enough time that I'll cycle back to it and sort of task switch back and forth between Climathon and other things. I've got a Wednesday wrap-up, first of the new year, coming on Wednesday, and that will feature a book that took me 4 months to finish. So, maybe it'll just come back around and that'll work for Climathon. We will see. The other thing that will happen today during the live stream is that, number one, I'm streaming to Instagram. So I'm going to pop over there and see if I can try to do both comment tabs at once. So feel free to chime in if you're on Instagram. Hello, live viewers. And I'm going to have to, number two, pop up and take a cake out of the oven because I did this the hour before and didn't realize that this would mean I would have to like stop and take it out so it didn't burn. So remind me to do that in 9 minutes. Okay, so welcome. That was a very, overwrought sort of start, but hello. I've got a question for you today to let you think about while we're diving into the readathon prompts. And they're very simple. So if you want to contribute an answer, what habit did you change, begin, or stop in 2023? So I will let you meditate on that while I'm going through my preparatory notes for Climathon. So again, all year round, and I think 12 prompts, but I'm not going to do one per month. That's way too regimented. So what I like to do, this is December 31st, what I like to do at the end of the month before the next month is give people recommendations for readathons that I'm participating in case they want to pick up a book. And I've got some very famous ones and some lesser known recommendations. So we'll go through once for recommendations, which are books that I have read, I loved, I am recommending, and I am sharing with you on Bookshop. So I'm an affiliate for bookshop.org. They're awesome. They're a tiny company that sells ebooks and, audiobooks on CD if people still do that, but also lets people be affiliates and link to independent bookstores, and is basically a competitor to the Zon, which has taken over everything. So I support bookshop.org, and people can support me through buying through them. So the first prompt is read a book about plants. Anytime in 2024, any book about plants. Now, I'm assuming this is meant to be mostly nonfiction. There is one that says cli-fi or positive sci-fi at the end, but I think that means that most of the others are going to be nonfiction. But you can interpret this how you like. If you are trying to learn climate stuff and a plant fiction book or poetry book is going to get you learning more power to you. Why not? But I've got some recommendations. So let me scroll down. Let me check Instagram. Oh, hello from Turkey. I see people joining on Instagram. That's super cool. Talking about climate books today and remembering to take a cake out of the oven. This is our job today. I think they put them in backwards. Yep. So I'll start at the bottom. Books about plants. Right at the top, we've got 5-star book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and 5-star book, Gathering Moss. These are 2 books that I have read by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. And she is an Indigenous scientist who teaches, researches, and writes about the dual worlds of plant knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, and Western medicinal and scientific knowledge, and how they all interlace and interweave and can learn from each other. These books are chef's kiss for Climathon, I think, because she's got a very gentle way of explaining science, which is not my thing. If we've got engineers listening, perhaps you'd be more amenable to the science, but also introducing other ways of looking at things and believing radical things in a gentle way. So, yeah, those 2 books are top of my list. Unfortunately, when I put them on first on Bookshop, they go to the bottom. So bottom of the list. And then I've got for plants, All We Can Save. So this is, let's see if I can point to it. This is a collection of essays, poetry, and some fiction, I believe. And it's subtitled Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. I picked this up as a new book thinking, oh, something positive instead of dystopian and terrible and depressing. Let's go for that. And it was a brilliant antidote. There are some things in here that talk directly about plants, but you will also see it popping up in other prompts, so I won't touch on it too much. And those are my plant recommendations. There is a story graph challenge for Climathon that Well-Traveled Books, I think, popped up. So feel free to check that out. Okay, I'm getting the thing where it says I can't reach the comments. There we go. We had people stopping by to say hello. Just Eva and Anita AF Stewart. Hello, hello. Anita's on both platforms because she's that awesome. Okay, so those are plant books. The second prompt is read a book about animals or fungi. And so one of the things I learned reading these sciencey books in the last couple years is animal kingdom, plant kingdom, fungi kingdom. It's its own kingdom. And there are a lot of things in there that I have no idea about because I don't see them visibly every day. And so I've got Science and Nature Writing 2022. I found this because it's the same editor as All We Can Save. And there are, again, this is a compendium. This is a grouping of writings published in other journals that a board or a panel decided were the best in the year. And so you get a very good, diverse sampling. The first essay is about anuses in nature, just to prepare you. I was not prepared, and I was, what? The second one is on slime molds, and someone who is obsessed with slime molds. So, again, very diverse group of essays and research. And in my review, I went back and listened to my review to refresh my memory. I noticed that a lot of these essays may have, I'm guessing they weren't tweaked for the 2022 book, but they were choosing essays that have a hook that is very personal or relatable, and then dives into the science research findings, and then comes back around to the hook in a very readable manner. So, great climate book for people who are like, I don't know, I don't want to read this, I don't get it, it's too complicated to understand. This is a good book for people dipping their toe in, because it gives you bite-sized examples in very readable formats. So, Best American Science and Nature Writing 2022. Beautiful cover too. Fungi, slime molds. The other one I have for the animal fungi prompt is Orchard, A Year in England's Eden by Nicholas Gates and Benedict MacDonald. And you've probably heard me talk about this one before. The interesting thing I found in this book is insects. I mean, it's not fungi, but insects are in the animal kingdom. So I have not been interested in insects in my life. I have had a war against insects, in fact, especially mosquitoes and wasps and all those other things that I'm allergic to when they sting me or bite me. So this book actually, I wouldn't say converted, but like edged me a little bit on the spectrum of like hatred to fascination, right? Some of the insects that they talk about as part of the ecosystem in this little corner of England's Eden that they watch for a year is are insects that like are responsible for fertilizing apple orchards, for example, or being food for birds, you know, the cycle of life, circle of life. And it just explored things in a way that I could digest easier. So yeah, that was a really great book for insects in the animal kingdom. And that's my second recommendation for animals or fungi. Okay, we're under a minute. So I'm going to go grab the cake and be right back for the third prompt, which is consumerism or capitalism. And you could see on the screen what I might be talking about for those, but BRB. Ooh. That is a beautiful chocolate cake. Okay, I'm excited about that for later. Woo! It's actually a chocolate tea bread, but I think Emma Bennett would still be proud of me for whipping up a cake. Okay, so third prompt, we're on read a book about consumerism or capitalism, and I've got two here. All We Can Save. So going back to like short essays and multiple formats and genres. Again, positive, uplifting, people doing good work in nonprofits in their communities to adapt to the climate change and to mitigate climate change, lobby decision makers, and prepare for, you know, what's happening right now. And so that was really great. But also, this was really interesting. Saving Capitalism for the Many, Not the Few by Robert B. Reich. So, Robert Reich is the former Treasury Secretary under Clinton. He's this really short guy who's really funny on TikTok. He's done a whole bunch of great things in writings and, you know, been economics researcher and advisor, and now he's spending his sort of retirement lobbying people to give a crap, basically. And he's given himself over to doing that like the popular ways with the young kids because he's very relatable. So I liked his voice and his writing here as well. And on YouTube, on TikTok, he's got great like drilled down little pieces of advice, timely messaging for, I don't know, saving capitalism. Not my brand, not an attractive title because, that's not what I think is going to save us and the world. But he lays out like the regulation and the safety nets, things like that would actually make it palatable and make it more like, I don't know, great. This is me being cheeky here. So that's the third prompt. Now on to the fourth, which is read a book about oceans. Oh, Leslie's here saying a quick hello. We'll be back late afternoon to replay. Happy almost New Year, everyone. Greetings from next year. Jim's way over in Georgia on the other side of the time divide. Thanks for dropping in, Jim. Happy 2024. Best wishes. Climathon has already started in Georgia. So oceans. So I've got 3 here. All We Can Save has some ocean-related content. Best Science Fiction and Nature Writing 2022 has some ocean-related content. So those are dipping in for a lot of the different prompts. But then also here, a book I read a couple years ago, Disposable City, Miami's Future on the Shores of Climate Catastrophe. So this I've put in here definitely. I listened to it from Libro.fm as an audiobook, and I believe the author reads it himself, and it's a very compelling audiobook, just in case you're wondering. But like, I am not a person who loves beaches. I'm not a hot weather person. I'm not a Miami person. I think that's a specific type of personality. But he made it really interesting because he was looking at, it was one of those kaleidoscope books that looks at lots of different aspects of one place in this case. And so it made it very interesting that Miami is dealing with climate catastrophe in these ways. It is now, it is not later. It is a city based on limestone. The real estate market is affected. The oceans, swamps, all these things, especially the water table. That's what made me think of putting this for the oceans prompt. Fascinating stuff. Things that, if we were allowed to learn what we were curious about, I think lots of people would have read or learned about this, but because of our education system, no. But this reporter and personal stories, he's actually shared some of his family things, like migration stories from Cuba and other places, because that's definitely got a big influence on Miami and Florida. So really great. Miami's Future. Good for the oceans prompt. Prompt number 5 is connection. Read a book about connection. So what I've got for this is, let's see, 4. So the Miami Disposable City book would count for this because it's connections about all these nature, science, biology, family history, social science, all these connections. Love it. Gathering Moss, because Robin Wall Kimmerer's essays in that book talk about how we as like macroorganisms relate to moss, which are like tiny things living in the tiny space between soil and air and water, and like how that's very special. Best Science and Nature of 2022 fits most of these prompts, but also the one that I would add for connections is The Heat Will Kill You First. This is by Jeff Goodell, who is another reporter. You'll see a lot of reporters on this list because I think they know well how to digest science information and make it palatable and relatable and compelling for reading audiences. Yes! Happy New Year, happy reading. Thank you, O's. Just chiming in for the Instagram tab here in case people stop by. But Jeff Goodell has written this book. He goes to places in California, places in the Northwest, places all over the United States, mostly. And he's talking about the climate crisis in terms of heat. When we think of oceans and oceans acidification or sea level rise, that's one danger. When we think of superstorms and like the pollution and the plastification of the ocean. There's lots of dangers associated with the climate crisis, but what he is arguing for, and pretty well in the different things that he details, is that it's just plain heat. Like the actual, 3.5 degrees Celsius increase is really going to impact everybody. That's the average across the world, which will manifest differently for different locations. And he argues for this very compellingly. So connections about individual stories adding up to a very compelling across the board. We need to look at heat, like heat exhaustion, heat stroke, people dying from exposure. Like this is serious and it's already happening, that may not be on our radar. So that's for the connections prompt. Prompt number 6, read a book by an Indigenous author. So already on here, Robin Wall Kimmerer is an Indigenous scientist, so braiding sweetgrass and gathering moss would work. Also, All We Can Save, because that has entries, essays, reportings from communities that are Indigenous. So some of them would apply to that prompt. Why is that included in a Climathon, you may ask? Because Western science and industrialization has got us into this climate crisis. It was not around. It was not a concern when Indigenous peoples were on their traditionally held lands, unceded traditionally held lands. So we need to look elsewhere for solutions because Western approaches are not getting us there fast enough, frankly. So that's why I think I agree with that prompt, and it's very important to look at other views, lenses, approaches to the world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Read a book about change or revolution. And what I have for this is, so Stephanie Schilling on Instagram says, I think it's such a gift when scientists at all can write something that people can digest and understand because it can be very complicated. Yes, exactly. It can also be very off-putting if you're trying to learn about something and it's just too complicated, or it's phrased in such a way because they're not writers by profession that makes it very opaque, and you're trying to do this thing and you feel like you're being gate kept, if that's a word. So yes, I agree, Stephanie. But for this prompt about revolution, let me move myself because I'm in front of the book here. Let's see if I could do that. Edit. Boop. There we go. Update. So, Black Ghost of Empire. I only read this in October, I believe, but it was profoundly impressive and affecting. I've read several other books that are about African Americans, mostly exploring their roots, their colonial legacy, their, disparate histories, and trying to connect with things far back in the past. This is not exactly that, but it's in the same arena. So this is Chris Manjapra. He's a British, I believe this is mostly in the British publishing arena again. And he's talking about the historian lens and empires that we don't often learn about, and specifically the moment in history that stretches out to our present day. But the start of abolition, so we have the start of slavery, racism, racializing peoples, and then we get into like people actually putting a halt to it, saying we really need abolition. But what we got was not abolition, but what's the word for like the hand he describes? He used Latin, and of course I never studied Latin, so it didn't stick. It's not sticking right now, but it was really important in the moment. What's it called? Okay, this is important. Someone tell me what the word is that's not abolition for the end of slavery. Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. Not manumission. Somebody help me. Emancipation? Is that it? That might be it. It's I think that's it. Emancipation. Because in Latin, he made the point that it literally means like giving away from the hand. And that sounds like man. I think that's it. Thank you, Deceiva. Okay, so it focuses on the fact that it's the owners of people letting go and giving freedom to people who were enslaved, when in fact, what you want to do is blow up the institution that allowed for people thinking that people could own people. So basically, it's like flawed from the start, right? From the 1780s, when the Quakers in Pennsylvania start thinking they're going to start this process, gradual emancipation. Yes, that is it, Jasiva, because that's in the flow. Yes, along to the 1820s and 1830s, when the British Empire is doing it, to the 1860s, when America finally gets on board. He talks about Spanish Empire, British Empire, French Empire, and how it's like still with us. So in terms of revolution and change, and like going about something the most half-ass way possible so that the bad effects of the institution stay with us decades, centuries into the future, like this is the case history, right? This is what we can look at and make the crossover in our heads to be like, oh, yeah, maybe we should blow up the institution that has started the climate crisis, which is capitalism, Western capitalism and industrialization. Maybe that needs to stop. Like, and we need to radically address things. So even if that's not your bag, reading about the history here in the Black Ghost of Empire would, I think, really impress people in terms of how do we face the climate? How did we face equality? And how are we doing on that? And sort of like mulling over the differences and similarities. So I would encourage you to use that for Climathon. And thank you for putting me out of my mystery, Justiva. That was really embarrassing. That's all right. Ava's come back. Jim also chiming in, Emancipation. Like, why couldn't I think of that? Yes. Generational trauma. Society gets that too. Yeah. He was with me here. Oh, we've got Professor Mab on Instagram. Hey, welcome. We're halfway through the recommendations for Climathon. I just finished Revolution, and now we're on number 8 prompt. Read a book by an activist. So obviously, Black Ghost of Empire is going to qualify for that one. So would science and nature writing, because it's about people who are acting together in their own communities for climate work. So would All We Can Save, because that is about people who are saving themselves and getting together their communities again. So those are all like previously mentioned. Prompt number 9, read a book about food. Okay, so we'll go back to our bookshop list here. Scroll up. I only had one recommendation for this one that would really sort of fit in, and that is An Everlasting Meal by Tamar Adler. So she's a cook, a food activist. This isn't a cookbook per se. It's more like a who's that famous food writer who's like John Green. It's like meandering thoughts, food philosophies, histories, anecdotes about food, mixed in with like, if you want to do this, if you want to get better at that, like, here's how you could think about things. It's not prescriptive, and she hardly has recipes in it. There's probably like 10 or 12. It's mostly about how can you change your thinking? How can you like scoot your way into something? And that is a little bit like what I'm asking about for my question of the day here. I found it to be a beautiful book, an uplifting and positive book. I read it like over 10 years ago now, and it's still on my shelf because I reread it recently and found it hits different, but it's still like slightly cajoling and useful. And so read a book about food for Climathon. This is what hit me. Number 10. Yes, the 10th prompt is read a book about Earth. Again, you might want to like sidle over to sci-fi if you're looking for wrangling other sorts of books into these prompts. but you also might just look at books that are about earth science. So I thought The Heat Will Kill You First could also work for earth, because he's definitely talking about like heat emanating from the earth, heat being reflected off of the earth from the sun, and like sciencey things. But I would also add two more for this one. One of my favorite authors is Robert Macfarlane. He's a nonfiction writer. He writes about words. He's done some interesting thing about words and meaning and linguistics. He also writes about science and nature. And so Underland was a book a couple years ago that is his diving into what is under the surface of the earth. So perfect for this prompt, but also deeply engaging. He's gone around the world doing things that interest him, basically, to make this book. From going to where they're mining for oil under the sea, where they've got like a dark matter science lab that's under the ocean, because it's the only place that has like no energy, like interfering with the calibrated instruments. He talks about, I think it's limestone caves under northern Italy he goes into. He also talks about the Paris catacombs, like crawling through and getting stuck, and claustrophobia. So lots of different places under the surface of the earth. So, you might read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for this one, but Underland by Robert Macfarlane was really fascinating for me to read. So I would use it for this prompt if I were you and you haven't read it. Also, a book that I read this past year called The Living Mountain by Nan Shepherd. Now, this is not recent. This is sort of a classic from, I believe, the 80s. She wrote it mostly in the 1940s, I believe, during World War II. And it's her personal experience and learning about the Cairngorms, where she grew up in northeastern Scotland, just north of Edinburgh. And the Cairngorms are a special mountain range. They share characteristics with other mountains in the UK, but they're pretty special. And so she talks about growing up next to them as a kid, having them as a backdrop, exploring them as an adult, being a mountaineer, like having people lost on them. Just a really interesting meditation with how these rocks, this mountain, is a living presence in her life. And so that's a little bit more woo-woo than Underland, but I think a really powerful counterpoint. Yes, it's New Year's Eve. I'm losing my words. But I've got chocolate cake, so we're good. So those are three good ones for the Earth prompt. Excuse me a moment. Feel free to answer the question. I'll cover it at the end before I do my pile of possibilities. We're almost there. Prompt number 11, read a book from a different continent. So this is pretty ambiguous. Like, is it set in a different continent? Is it by an author from a different continent? Is it about subject matter from a different continent? So pretty wide open. I said The Living Mountain is in the UK, Scotland, and that's a different continent from me, unfortunately. So that would work. So would Underland, because as I said, he traipses around the world going under the earth to like bring back these interesting natural world phenomena and like musing about them and getting a little bit like, what will change about this? How does this affect us? How does it affect the industry? Really interesting stuff. So those two already mentioned. And then another different continent from me is a memoir. And I can see it, so I won't move myself. But To Speak for the Trees, My Life's Journey from Ancient Celtic Wisdom to a Healing Vision of the Forest by Diana Beresford Kroger. And I think it's a really unusual memoir, because in this book, which I listened to thanks to Libro.fm, Diana Beresford Kroger is starting off this memoir with, she was an outsider. She's got half Anglo, half Irish background. And so she was living with Irish relatives near the ancient Celtic forests that she's talking about learning Gaelic, learning nature, learning humility, that sort of background, and then has to return to the world of the city and social expectations and the sort of upper crust of Britain for her Anglo side of the family, which is very well off and like has titles or something. So she's got the outsider status, and then she sort of melds that with like the place that we see more represented in media, the sort of Downton Abbey status. And so she's got these two lenses. So you might be seeing a trend here. I like people who have different lenses and sort of the kaleidoscope view. So she talks about how she bucks the trend. As a woman, she goes to study biology and trees, and she's gotten some really interesting assignments around the world studying trees and advocating for them, for the old growth, for the forest being intact, for places that haven't been explored to be left alone. So she uses the Lorax's motto to speak for the trees for her memoir. She also ends this memoir with the Ogham alphabet, which is like the very old sort of runic looking script that is based on trees for a lot of the characters, and explains like a little anecdote about each of the trees described by the Ogham runes, which I thought was really cool. Not something you're exposed to often in the run of things. So that was really neat. Eva is over on Instagram, dumping YouTube for Instagram. Eva says the last read of the year for her, oddly enough, may be a good fit somewhere in Climathon. The Overstory by Richard Powers, for sure. When I was looking up cli-fi, which is the last prompt here, cli-fi or positive sci-fi, the Overstory was on some of the lists, but because I haven't read it, I can't recommend it. These are only books that I've read and loved that I can recommend. Eva says it's trees and how it's all connected. I'm early in it yet. Yeah, and my rule is that whenever you finish it is when it counts. So if that goes in January 2024, you started Climathon, which is pretty cool. I think we've got a Meredith and we've got an Evan. Wow, people from like way, way back in the Instagram history. Very cool. Eva says this book has comparisons to the Lorax in reviews on the cover. It's a sign, I guess, to read her book too. Yeah. She read it. As I mentioned, it's a Libro book for me, but I think it would be pretty richly rewarding to read in print or on ebook as well. So definitely recommend. And hey to Jonathan Michael Anderson. Hello, hello. Nice to see some Instagram folks. I'm testing out the comments on 2 tabs, so thanks for bearing with me here. And we got Marilyn on the YouTube side. Happy New Year. It's morning on New Year's Eve, still in 2023. So we've got from Georgia 2024 to Hawaii still morning. Pretty awesome. So welcome. Cli-fi or positive sci-fi. And so that excludes basically your dystopian, your I don't know, doom and gloom, the world has ended and humanity is terrible type books. And I'm low on this category. I have lots of to be read books, but only one that I can sort of say might fit this prompt. So if you can see, if I move out of the way again, pop down here, Dry. So this is actually a book by Neil Shusterman and his son, Jared Shusterman. And I always forget his name and want to call him Neil Stevenson, but Shusterman. He's great. This is a young adult dystopian thriller. So I don't know. The hosts can tell me if that works or not. But what I found really intense, I couldn't put it down. It was a page turner. I was listening to it. I couldn't put it down. Is that this seems very, very possible. It's basically like the Colorado River compact fails and Arizona or Colorado or whoever turns off the tap for the water flowing into Southern California. Cue Home Alone phase, right? So Southern California goes like wigs out and doesn't have water. First of all, there's the panic. There's a grocery store panic, and then there's like battening the hatches, and then there's like roaming looters, and then there's the military deployed. And so you go through these phases of like what would happen, and it all felt very real and very scary. So I don't know that it would be positive note, but you do have the young adult protagonist, you have her next door neighbor, you have I think there's another character who comes into play, and like how they managed to survive, and the pieces that they learn from or that were already in them that come in useful. And so like I was taking notes on dry. So again, don't know if that strictly qualifies, but it was a really good book. And if it does, Tamsin, and let us know. And yeah, highly recommend. Ooh. Okay, so what was recommended in this category in well-traveled books announcement video was like solar punk, I think. But Anita, always good for the punk subgenres here. If you're looking for optimistic cli-fi or positive sci-fi, the subgenre called hope punk might be something to look into. So that like Google searching or YouTube searching or Instagram searching might yield some good recommendations to add to that prompt. That's great. Very helpful. Okay, so here's where we pause. And I've only got one habit change answer. So let me highlight that from Eva. I changed my morning habits with the introduction of kindergarten work hours. Kid going off to school. That's a big change. I began reading habits. Yay! And stopped nicotine habits in 2023. That's a huge one. Ooh, well done. And just like well done rolling with the punches for those other ones, because changing a lot of habits at once is hard, I think. So, what did I say I was going to do during the break? I said I was going to do something at the end before I go into my TBR pile. And I've already forgotten. What is it? Someone want to help me? I didn't mention what's coming up. So Wednesday, the first wrap up of 2024, obviously going to be excited about that. And then Friday is the first Friday productivity stream of 2024. Very excited for that. And I'm also hosting a planathon panel. So I think there will be 6 or 7 of us this Friday, and it's going to be an evening thing. So after work, if you can drop in and you want sort of company while you're planning your goals or setting resolutions or just sort of evaluating 2023 and processing, I will be hosting some lovely friends Friday evening. So tune in for that. I will be setting up the stream maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. It's that weird, someone called it Betwixtmas, and I like that. So we're in the Betwixtmas week. So who knows what'll happen. But what did I say I was going to do? Is anyone going to help me out? Question and answers. Solar punk is good. Yep. I did Q&A. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe it'll pop up. Maybe I'll have to rewatch the stream and then put it in a comment. We're embracing the chaos energy. It's all good. The people who are here will definitely enjoy it. So I'm all good with it. Okay. So now for my hopefuls pile of possibilities. Okay, so I put them out of order. Let's go back through one at a time. We've got plants. Let's see. Plants. I've got that one's in my bedroom. Okay, well, if you're on Storygraph, where the challenge is, you can see that I'm currently reading a Peter Wohlenbein book. He's a German writer. It's been translated. The Secret Life of Trees. I'm reading The Secret Network of Nature. It's meh, but I'm going to finish it in January, and I'm going to count it as a plant book. So there we go. But you know what also work for plants is this, which I remember an Australian booktuber who's no longer posting, unfortunately, recommending and saying it was really good. Islands of Abandonment by Cal Flynn, Nature Rebounding in the Post-Human Landscape. So this I actually got used, right? Yeah. And it was a find. I was very excited. It's a book by someone who's written about the homelessness epidemic. And so I'm really interested in the social sciences aspect of nature rebounding. So excited about that, and haven't found a place to plug it in yet. So plants, animals, or fungi. That's so again, freely interpreting these prompts. This is cli-fi, but it's centered around animals, namely wolves being reintroduced in Scotland. So I thought that would be a cool one. Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. I know Jim just read this and said it was really good. I know other people have said it was really good, and it's been on my shelf. I got a used copy from Book of the Month, and I need to read it. So I know one wants to buddy read. We can take slots all through 2024. Consumerism and Capitalism. My thing for that is a backlist book that's been on my shelf for a long time, and it's survived several purges. This is Fugitive Denim by Rachel Louise Snyder. Like, again, queen of books you've never heard of. A moving story of people and pants in the borderless world of global trade. So basically like global capitalism, fast fashion, especially focusing on denim. And I am assuming or expecting this will treat like people in the maquiladoras, and like how offshore practices have affected this, but especially denim. I'm wondering like what's going to be special about that versus other materials and supply chains. So not expecting anyone to want to, read this with me. It's probably like 15 years old by now. I've had it a while. Oh, 2009, 2008. So like 20 years. But I think it'll still be interesting. So consumerism. Oceans. We got a plant book here that's also going to deal with oceans because it's The Seaweed Chronicles, or sorry, there's no the. Seaweed Chronicles, A World at the Water's Edge by Susan Hand Shetterly. It's a small book, but it's not illustrated. I half expected it to be illustrated, but it is not. I really like moss, and I feel like seaweed is a cousin to moss that you can actually eat. So like, what's not to love about that? So I'm assuming I will be learning about oceans as well as plants in that one. So that would be good for 2 prompts. We've got Connection. Oh, so this is another backlist one. A Paradise Built in Hell. It has sat on my shelf for a good while. It's a Rebecca Solnit book. She's a writer that I loved from a long time ago, but I haven't read anything I liked by her recently since Men Explain Things to Me, which was pretty good. But this is from the copyright page, 2009 as well. So like, no, not 20 years, 15 years. And yeah, I think it'll be more like her walking book that I really liked, where she's talking about people in catastrophes and how they form communities and help each other. So one of the things I think we'll need to be doing in the future for Climate World 2024. So yeah, it's a really good one. This might be a good one. Leslie, if you want to buddy read this for one of our social issues months, that would be cool. So that's for Connections by an Indigenous author. I've got 2 here. One I've actually started reading. I just read one of the stories from Walking the Clouds, which is a collection of Indigenous science fiction, as you can probably tell by the goofy. I mean, to me, it looks like macaroni or seashells in space. To me, that says goofy, but like the one story I read so far is good. Oh, let me check back with Instagram. Doesn't come with content warnings, but could use at least one. I hope to finish it tonight. Oh, the overstory. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. Professor Mab, that's I'm forgetting your second name. Antoine? Nope. Apparently during the gold rush, there was more money to be made in denim than gold. Yeah, because selling to the miners was more lucrative than being a miner yourself, for sure. For sure. Author Lorna Dell is here. Hello, hello. More books. Yes, more books. So yeah, Indigenous author, collection of authors. The short story collections are always an advantage because if you like one of them, you can look up whether they have other work, and then you've got a whole new fandom to cash in on. So that was good. And then the one that I'm embarrassed to say has been on several TBRs and like wanting to read it, but it's big and dense, so I haven't managed to. That's The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. And every time I read it, I think I do want to read this, but I don't get around to it because it's intimidatingly big. No, it's only 350 pages. Why is it so heavy? Okay, expensive cardstock has been fooling me, and like spaced out words. I don't know. Anyway, Indigenous author, well reviewed. I need to get on it. If anyone wants to read that with me, let me know. The next prompt by an activist, Islands of Abandonment would work for that. Next prompt about food. Oh, I skipped Revolution. That is the only one I have a question mark for. So if anyone has a recommendation for me for a climate book about change or revolution, please drop that in the comments. That is my empty space that I need to fill. Book about food. This is one that I've been meaning to read for a long time, been on my shelf. It's called Food Heroes, 16 Culinary Artisans Preserving Tradition by Georgia Pellegrini. Kind of like with the slow food movement. I think that's where this writer has been most well known, but it's profiling different people around the world who are preserving traditions. And hopefully there's some overlap with like preserving traditions in a non-damaging the environment way, because I think getting back to those roots that were thrifty would be definitely helpful, and the opposite of like disposable food culture. So we'll see about that and whether I can adopt any of those practices. That would be great. Then I've got Earth, which this book I picked up pretty recently, probably only a year I've had it. Scarp, In Search of London's Outer Limits by Nick Papadimitriou. So it's a Londoner who like walks around London, and scarp is a word to describe, well, at least it's related to escarpment, which is like a cliff. So I think what he's doing is going around looking at like local geography, geology, how it's shaped London, but also like personal things. I read some things about the author that made me like think I might not enjoy it, so that's why it's been languishing. But really, I just need to get stuck in, as the Brits say, and give it a try. So that would be good for Earth. From a Different Continent would be Scarp because it's London. And then cli-fi or possible sci-fi. I've got loads of TBR recs, like I said. So I've got The Seed Keeper is on that list. Walking the Clouds, the Indigenous sci-fi is on that list. Once There Were Wolves is on that list. And then the one that I haven't talked about yet is Waiting for the Night Song by Julie Carrick-Dalton. This was a used one I picked up and haven't read. It's in the cli-fi category, so that is on my list of to read. Emma's popping in to hit the like button. Emma, you'd be proud of me. I disappeared on Discord because I went and baked a cake, so yay. And saying Happy New Year. Thank you. Taste was one of my fave books of the year by Stanley Tucci. That is one of the most requested audiobooks on Libro's list, I think, which is surprising because he's amazing, but like I wouldn't have expected a food memoir to be that huge, which is great. Has a little bit of everything, memoir, recipes, life. And I haven't read anything by him, so maybe his writing will be just my style, Marilyn. That would be great. Larissa Brown, hello on Instagram. Dottie's girl, nice to see people, and even people I don't know. Let's see. Wrapping up because we're almost at the hour. I'm getting a headache. The one more I would offer for positive sci-fi is the books by Alice Henderson. So she's a friend, an author friend of mine, and I've been reading her new series, which is the Collective Noun books, like the let's see, there's one with polar bears, there's one with wolverines, and the latest one is caribou, but I don't want to get the titles wrong. So we've got A Solitude of Wolverines, which is her first one, which I loved. Blizzard of Polar Bears, which second one I loved. That's the one I just read a few months ago. Super action-y, page-turning, also an advocate for wildlife, and she's a scientist who writes. So like she gets her facts right, and she takes you to these brilliant, remote, rural, cold in that case locations that you get to learn about cool things. The next one is called A Ghost of Caribou, which I have not read, which came out last year. So that's the next on my list. But she also wrote a whole like more cli-fi focused fantasy series. Shattered Skies, I think, is the name of it. So be sure to check that out on her website, or wherever you find books. So those are all my pile of possibilities. They've migrated from the right to the left. And I'm going to take a minute to take a sip. The cake is out of the oven. I told you that we've got the Climathon coming up on Friday night. There was something else I was going to say in between. It was about the audience, and I've forgotten. So that will have to wait till the comments. So lovely to see the folks on Instagram. You have to have a separate tab open. So I'm going to say bye, Instagram. Thanks so much. And I will pop this in my feed as soon as I conclude the StreamYard. But Happy New Year. Happy 2024. I hope I see you on some Climathon videos in the future. And now I'm back on YouTube and LinkedIn with the magic of cinematography and the internet. I don't know. But just coming back here to say thank you guys for watching. I'll be back Wednesday for the wrap up. I've got 4 books, so there may be more in the next couple days. And Friday, we've got First Friday productivity stream and the Planathon. So come by if you're interested. Because JC voted, I'm going to get my author copy somehow soon of the new cover for The King and just like get it done. I've been procrastinating, but chop, I need to get on that. It's the last day of the year. It's also the last day of the month to get a January postcard. If you're interested in snail mail over on my Patreon. Do I have a banner for that? Nope. That's okay. That's all right. It'll be down in the description. That is your New Year's Eve broadcast. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to like the stream. Comment if you've got a recommendation for me for change or revolution on the climate front. And subscribe if you're new. I would love it. And with that, chop. Happy New Year, everybody, on YouTube.